Welcome everybody to the Community Board 3 land use meeting for October. We have two items on the agenda today. We're going to have a land use and zoning 101 presentation, and then we'll talk about the district needs and budget priorities. So I'll go ahead and start by taking attendance of the committee members, and then we'll approve the minutes. So please indicate if you are present. Anisha Stephen, present. Jake Gold.
Present.
Alistair.
Yes, I'm here, thank you.
Andrea.
Present.
Herman. Trevor.
Present.
Damaris.
Present.
Sandra.
Present.
Jackie. Dominic.
Present.
And Steve.
Present.
Great. I wanted to know if anybody has any comments on the minutes from last month. Otherwise, we will consider those approved. All right, seeing no comments, the minutes from September are approved. And with that, I will hand it over to DCP for the training.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, or having us at your meeting, rather. My name is Oscar Maiden. I am the East Side team leader, and I'm also joined by Francesca, who is the CB3 liaison. I'm just going to share my screen real quick, and we will get started. Just an overview of what, how we will be doing the presentation itself. It's a presentation on zoning 101, and I will go through the presentation, and at the end I will take questions that anyone might have. So, okay. All right. So CB3. So the objectives for today, essentially, as part of this training, we are hoping that you can understand what is zoning, the history of zoning, and why it is important, how we got to where we are today in terms of what zoning allows, what is in the zoning resolution itself, who does what in terms of authority of implementing zoning, and then some tools that we have that you can use better understand what zoning provide you. So what is zoning? At its core, zoning is meant to regulate sort of the what, how much, and where of building and uses within the city. So it provides a certainty for new development and the surrounding neighborhood, but it also sets up specific rules of long-term patterns of development and establishes a predictable framework for appropriate growth within different parts of the city. The way it does this is through zoning controls. So the main zoning controls are on land use, which establishes and sets the permitted uses that are viewed as compatible within an area or neighborhood. It controls the bulk, which regulates the building size, shape, density, things like building height, setback. Those are all related to the bulk itself. It also regulates parking and loading. And it also has streetscape requirements that relate to the ground floor or signage or open space. Big question of why do we have zoning? So this, I will kind of go into the history of where zoning came from in this part of the presentation. And a big driver for the zoning we have today was the historic population growth that happened mostly towards the end of 1800s. And this population growth led to unprecedented, levels of people within a small geographic area. This before we had, the subway that led to more spread out of density within New York City, so a lot of people were living in the same space, which led to a lot of public health concerns, and that eventually required the zoning to spread out how we use the space and for essentially for people. So the three themes of this that responded to these concerns were progressive era tenement reforms. Then there was a call for segregation of uses and a call for bulk regulations. For the progressive era tenement reforms, there were a lot of social reformers that advocated for improvement in quality in space, especially because of a lot more people became aware of the conditions of people living in buildings. Lower East Side is not foreign to tenement buildings, and a lot of this reform happened actually within the Lower East Side. So there was concerns for light and air within these apartment buildings. There was to reduce disease, and this is an image from Jacob Riis's How the Other Half Lives, which was a publication of photographs that really transformed and opened people's eyes of what was happening in these tenement buildings and living conditions of a lot of these people. So the initial tenement reform was related to just residential uses, and the passage of the tenement law was to equip buildings with things like fire escapes, hall ventilation, sewage facilities, and things like that. So a lot of it was related to public health. Then there was also a call for segregation of uses. With the demand and the rise in ready-made clothing that happened within New York City, a lot of New York, especially within the garment center, a lot of New York immigrants filled this niche of making piecework clothing. Originally, this work was done within the residential buildings, within the tenements, but the garment production was banned in residences, and people started moving out to more, the lofts that we see all around historically through Soho, and also the garment center. But at the same time, because at that time there was no regulation of where these different uses could be built up, there was concerns from people of a lot of this industrial use, and nuisance producing uses being right in the residential districts, or there were no districts at that time, but right next to residential uses essentially, and next to commercial uses. So there was a call to segregate these uses for better for the public. Which led another aspect of zoning was the bulk regulations. There was this race to the top that prompted a lot of skyscrapers. And at this time, while the tenement laws were regulating residential uses, there was no regulation around commercial buildings and at that time. So these buildings were built unchecked. And because of the improvements in technology and construction materials, they were able to build to heights and bulk that were not seen before, and the city was not prepared for or regulated, and it really created a lot of issues around light and shadow that were impacting the neighborhoods and surrounding. So one of the big examples of what prompted the zoning resolution is the Equitable building, and ironically I'm sitting in the Equitable building right now. So it's one of those things that DCP likes to think of, like how we're planning while we're sitting in the place that gave birth to the zoning resolution. So what all of these concerns led to was the idea of wanting to establish the zoning resolution that would legalize and give control and authority to the government to control land use and private land for providing public good. And this public good was public health and welfare. And New York City was the first to establish a zoning resolution in the United States. And at that time, it was, again, the concerns that led to zoning resolution were more public health and safety related, more land use concerns related and bulk related. So the first zoning resolution in 1916 really just addressed these concerns. So it separated uses in the different use districts. It created height districts, which controlled how high you could build based on the street you're on, wide streets versus narrow streets, things like that. It created area districts that had very specific, yard courts and types of residential regulations that addressing the concerns that came before. However, over time, the zoning resolution kind of became something that wasn't addressing, still wasn't regulating buildings at the level that it could, which gave rise to the 1961 zoning resolution. There was a lot of changing trends at that time in construction, again, construction being a big motivator for it, changes in the types of buildings being built. And the 1916 resolution was just becoming obsolete at that time. So this was the first sort of overhaul of the zoning resolution. And to this day, the 1961 resolution for the most part still applies. And the changes made to the zoning resolution at this time are more piecemeal, or just going through different things, or going through different neighborhoods, or doing different districts and things like that. So, at the base of it, it's still the 1961 resolution. So post 1961, sort of where we're at now, our planning work revolves around a lot more than just those concerns on health and safety. So these are sort of some of the themes that have come out of the work that DCP has been doing over the past few years. One of the big things was the contextual zoning that was introduced in 1987. This created quality housing regulations that introduced the contextual zoning to promote neighborhood character and provide appropriate density. As you can see on this diagram on the right, height factor tends to encourage taller buildings on smaller footprints, whereas quality housing buildings are bulkier and more intended to relate to the surrounding context. And you can tell if a zoning district is contextual if it has a letter suffix at the end. So R, in this example, there's R6B. So the B kind of lets you know that this is a contextual zone. And it essentially establishes rules around street wall location, maximum base heights, upper story setbacks, maximum building heights, and things like that. We also introduced mixed use districts. So essentially in the past, there was, the separation of uses being the methodology that was applied in, post 1916 and things like that. But land use and building typologies and things are always evolving. So mixed use districts were established to allow more residential and non-residential uses that are compatible with each other to be located within the same building. And this was a significant change from the original intent of zoning to separate residential uses from other uses. But since those initial concerns around public health and safety, technology and things have improved a lot more. Commercial and residential can be co-located. Sometimes even very light manufacturing can be co-located with commercial or residential uses. So that's where the mixed use districts kind of comes in. Zoning also has requirements for public open spaces, such as in the waterfront public access. There's requirements for public access as an additional public amenity. We also have, a big program within New York City is the privately owned public spaces, also known by its acronym POPs, which are spaces that are dedicated to public use and enjoyment, but owned and maintained by private property owners in exchange for, a bonus floor area or a waiver of some sort. We also created affordable housing programs, zoning. Another thing that zoning responds to is things like the need for housing, and especially the need for affordable housing. So with the adoption of the voluntary inclusionary housing for quality and affordability, and most recently the mandatory inclusionary housing, zoning has also been used as a tool to promote and require affordable housing, especially within the new developments across the city. Zoning can also be used as a tool to require flood resiliency within coastal areas. And this requires homes to be elevated above floodplain and provide other wet and dry flood proofing measures. The city recently adopted the zoning for coastal flood resiliency tax amendment to help the city become more resilient against future storms, which CB3 probably remembers when we had the the Euler process and everything for this not too long ago. So, while looking at what zoning is doing and the concerns that it responds to, it's also important to understand what it does or it can do and what it doesn't do. There's often misconceptions about what zoning can do. And so, I think it's important to kind of go over some of these things. Essentially, zoning is intended to provide a balanced or harmonious relationship between different users of the city and to plan for and provide a predictable framework for long-term patterns of development. But it doesn't generate development. So while it provides that framework and determines what is permitted to build, it wouldn't be something that would then automatically generate development on those lots and on those sites. It's also, it can influence the size and shape of building and permitted uses, but it can't dictate construction techniques, architectural styles, design materials. It also can't require the demolition or changes of existing buildings. So, for example, if a neighborhood were to rezone today, anything that's existing or pre-approved, that is already that gets accepted into the legacy of that place, and it wouldn't be something that they have to then now conform to the new regulations or anything like that. So existing buildings, zoning does not prompt changes to those buildings. I'll also go through some terms that I might have mentioned you guys are familiar with. You will hear about that zoning kind of regulates or talks to. One of these being the floor area ratio, or FAR. FAR is the principal bulk regulation that controls the size of a building. So it will tell you how much floor area can go on a given zoning lot. And the way that the FAR works is a ratio of the total building floor area to the area of its zoning lot. When you multiply FAR to the lot area of the zoning lot, you can get the maximum allowable floor area on that zoning lot. For example, you can look here. We have a 10,000 square foot lot, and a permitted FAR on this lot is 2.0. How the developer puts that 2.0 on that lot will be, there are zoning controls such as bulk controls, which I'll go over, that dictate where that floor area can go. But essentially, the second image here, which shows a 2 FAR building that covers the entire lot, is the same floor area on the last building, which shows a much taller building bulk, but it's the same amount of 10,000 square feet. That's just divided up in a different way. With it covers 25% of the lot, and that gets you the height, but it's still the same amount of floor area. So how does that floor area get divided up? And that's where the zoning bulk envelope comes in. A building envelope is the maximum 3-dimensional space on a zoning lot within which the FAR needs to fit. The envelope can be larger than the building that eventually gets built on that space. And throughout the zoning resolution, there are many different sorts of zoning envelopes that exist. No one is the same as the other, because each district has its own rules. There are there are zoning overlays in different areas and things like that. So it is more unique in terms of what it could be. Two buildings, two lots next to each other that allow the same sort of building envelope, but they lead to very different looking buildings. So the bulk is the umbrella term we use to describe that overall building form. And this is controlled through zoning by a combination of lot size, FAR, lot coverage, open space, yards, height, and setback. When we talk about a building height, that is the overall vertical dimension. And we talk about base height, that is the vertical dimension of the front wall before any required setbacks. In the illustration on the right, the overall building height is 85 feet and the base height is 75 feet with a 10-foot setback. The zoning resolution also establishes zoning districts through the zoning map. And each of these zoning districts have a complete set of regulations. And you're going back to what those regulations being the height, FAR, yard, parking requirements, things like that. And the precise mapping of these districts is key to our planning work at DCP. And within these zoning districts, there are the use groups that are permitted for each district. This is a chart of the permitted use groups that are that are set out in the zoning resolution. And these specific uses are allowed in they range from something, use group 1 and 2, which are residential, to all the way to use group 18, which is manufacturing. So you can see that the numbers kind of relate to the intensity of the use. So R1 would be the lowest intensity of residential. R10 is the highest intensity of residential use. So how does zoning actually work? I mentioned all these different things, but when you're applying this to a specific lot and you're trying to determine what the development program will be on a lot, you look at the lot size and type. You look at the specific zoning district it's located in. You can anticipate the program it's going to have based on the use groups and permitted uses within that zoning district. And then you apply the specific use, bulk, and parking regulations to that program to kind of, at the end, what you're left with is the sort of the different ways that you can build on that lot. So an important thing to understand also for zoning is the goal of zoning and why it's important is that, a lot of the New York City is an as of right city. What does that mean is developments can happen as of right, as long as they conform to the zoning resolution. So if it fits within the zoning resolution, there is no need for it to go through any approvals or anything like that. It goes straight to the Department of Buildings, Department for a permit. Department of Building will review the building permits and will confirm its compliance within the zoning resolution and other building codes. So, if something does not go through DOB, what happens if there are changes to a lot that are not as of right? Who has authority to do what is an important thing to understand. The city charter gives authority to city planning, to study, create, and recommend zoning changes. And then DOB has the authority to interpret and enforce zoning regulations. And then the BSA, the Board of Standards and Appeals, has the authority to grant variances to zoning for hardship on unique sites. But another aspect of authority that you all are familiar with is also that the City Planning Commission has the authority to grant certain special permits and approvals through waivers. And one of the big things that the board is involved with and city planning is involved with is the ULURP process, which is the Uniform Land Use Review process. This is for different applications that are going through, it's a very long review process. Once an application has been deemed complete, which is reviewed, by DCP staff here to ensure that it has all the materials that is needed for it to go, public, because once the completion of the application is important because we want to make sure all the decision makers have all the information they need to be able to determine, how to opine on that project, for example, So once it's deemed complete and it's certified complete, it goes through the process of the public review, which involves the community board. It's referred to the community board for 60 days for them to give its recommendation. Goes to the borough president and the board for their recommendations. Then it comes back to the city planning commission to the Village City Planning Commission to review it and to vote on it. And after that, it is the project goes to city council, which then have the ability to approve or request modifications or to disapprove applications. And throughout this process, this process is all public process, and there's multiple ways for the public to get involved within this, whether it's through the community board or at the city planning commission as well. When the application comes to the city planning commission at a public hearing, the public can attend that as well and opine on the project at that time. And then at the end, there is 5 days for the mayor to review, and they might veto any of the actions that the city council has, but then the city council has the ability to override the mayoral veto with a 2/3 majority vote. So very involved process, involved public electeds, community boards, the public, the city planning commission. It's that, and it's not an easy process to go through. So that's why a lot of the developers, their goal is really to comply with zoning resolution. It's something that if they're complying with it, they wouldn't really need to go through too much on a FULR and can go through an as-of-right process. Also important to note that planning is more than just zoning. Zoning is one of the many planning tools and strategies that the city uses, the DCP uses, and it's just sort of one tool in our toolkit. We like to say that a lot, that we employ. We look at housing, community resources, access, mobility and circulation, jobs and businesses. Work with different agencies and all different things. So zoning and land use is just one part of what we do. I will also point out the different tools to understand zoning. We have the entire zoning resolution is online and is accessible to the public. There is also an online PDF of the zoning handbook, both of which are, the zoning handbook is really just an accessible version of the zoning resolution, because zoning resolution can be a bit hard to understand if you're new to zoning resolution. I will show you what that looks like as well. So as you can see here, this is what a zoning resolution looks like. It has the zoning text. It is a very legal, text, because it has legal ramifications. So, and it's divided up into chapters and sections. The way you read a zoning resolution would be, there's an article, a chapter, a section. All of this information is on our on the online version of the zoning resolution at the DCP website. And it kind of goes through what's permitted, what's not, where it's permitted. Terms are defined in the zoning resolution as well. And it's it kind of, anybody can kind of go through and read it, but not everybody might be able to understand it as much, because like I said, it's a legal document. So the zoning handbook kind of simplifies what's in the zoning resolution itself and puts it in a way that's more understandable. So if you go through the zoning handbook, it's I would really highly suggest that it illustrates what different things are. A lot of the terms I've talked about today are also in the zoning handbook, and it explains to you what it means to be in a contextual zone, what it means to be in a special district, and things like that. There's other tools I want to point out as well that are available on our website. The New York City zoning and land use map, which is the Zola map. I will show you an image of that as well. So on the left is what our zoning maps look like, our legal zoning maps that are in the zoning resolution. But then we have the same sort of information on Zola, which is more accessible. You can toggle on and off different districts. You can see how they overlay on top of each other. And you can search by address. If you search an address on here, it will go to that specific lot and you can see exactly which zoning district it's in, if there's a commercial overlay on it, if there's any special districts, and it provides you links to different, what does that mean on the side as well. So if there's an overlay, for example, a C12 overlay, there will be a link that says like, what is C12? And then you can go through that and kind of look at what that means as well. So it's very accessible and it's a really great tool for you to understand what's in your neighborhood. If you're trying to see what's permitted and things like that, highly recommend going through Zola. So those are all of the tools. Again, I want to the other two I didn't mention is the Equitable Development Data Explorer. That's also a new tool that DCP has launched. I will send this presentation to the committee board, and the links are all on this site, on the slide. There's also the DOB permit status, which makes like all the as of right developments that are happening. You can look at permits that are filed for different developments and things like that. So the city just trying as much as it can to have that transparency in the development that's happening in your neighborhood. So I know that was a lot that I went through, but if anyone has any questions or anything specific, or if I kind of sped through something, feel free to ask those now.
I'm going to open it up to anybody from the committee who has any questions, and then we'll open it up to anybody from the public. And if you are not a committee member, if you could leave your name and affiliation in the chat just for attendance purposes so we know who's here. But are there any committee members that have any questions? I actually have a question. I have two questions. They're more about if you could tell us a little bit more about that Equitable Data Explorer. Is that what was at the very end?
Yes.
A little bit more about that and how to use that. And then I know you went over the Euler process a little bit. We do have a couple of new committee members. And just maybe a little bit more explanation on that process and specifically the role of the community board. That would be great.
Yeah, sure. So I'll go through Euler first. Like I said earlier, if there are, the zoning resolution has certain, things like a special permit, for example. If an application is applying for a special permit for their development, they will go through a Euler process. And what that process would entail is first they would come to city planning, during the pre-certification process, where they will tell us what they're proposing, and the staff will really go through the project with the applicant, and and our goal in this pre-certification timeline is to make sure that it's something that DCP can support. So the end product that it's coming out of that is there's a lot that happens before an application even comes for the public. But once it's at a stage where the applicant wants to go ahead with it, or DCP believes that it's at a stage that it can be something that we could support. There are times when we don't support an application, and we would say as much. At the end of a pre-certification process, usually it's an application that could be supported and has a good land use rationale, and it meets all the findings and things like that that it needs to. So it will then the staff will present that application at a review session to the City Planning Commission, and the City Planning Commission will certify the application. After this first certification of the application, the application is then referred to the community board for 60 days. And the community board is required to then hold a public hearing on that project. At that public hearing, typically the applicant will come and present the project to the community board. They will answer your questions. Any public comments that are on the project, things like that. And essentially, this is this serves as the first way that the public gets involved in a project or an application at the community board. The community board will then provide recommendations. They can, there's sort of different ways that they can respond to it. They can approve it, approve with conditions, disapprove with conditions, or I think another one is just abstain. I'm not sure exactly what those the different things are, but essentially those recommendations that are the community board provides will then go to both the borough president and the City Planning Commission. The City Planning Commission reviews every recommendation they receive for every project. The recommendations that the board has brought to us is then also presented to the City Planning Commission at the following review. When it comes back to the City Planning Commission at their review session, we get to hear again what the community board thought about the project. So after the community board is a 30-day referral to the borough president. And then the borough president is responsive toward community concerns in their recommendation. After the recommendation of the borough president, the City Planning Commission then has 60 days to vote on that application. And like I said, during those 60 days, the application will go through a public hearing, which is when the applicant will present the project again. The City Planning Commission will ask questions to the applicant directly. A lot of these questions come out of concerns that were raised in the community during the community board process, during the borough president process. So the community concerns that they brought up are reviewed, and they've informed the City Planning Commission's view of how the public is responding to this. And at the public hearing, we also have the public who can speak to the process as well. So that's sort of where you learn the direct relationship that the community board has within the ULURP process. Does that answer your question, Michelle? Or?
Yeah, that was great. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. And the other thing you talked about is the Equitable Data Development Explorer. So that's sort of a much larger, so essentially what the EDE is meant to do is create a space and that will lead to more conversations around equity and around displacement and things like, and around what are the conditions of the neighborhood. It really goes through a lot of different, there's a lot of data. As you can see from the name, there's a lot of data that went into establishing different, indexes and things like that. So it's hard for me to just kind of go over it in this explanation, in this short answer, but, the website itself does have, an explanation. It also has a tutorial of how to navigate the Explorer and things like that. So I recommend definitely, if you're interested in that, to go to the EDE website.
Thank you. Susan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, on the equitable development, how does the community board get involved with that, or are we involved? How is that used? How do we use it to be involved?
Yeah, so the Explorer itself is really, it's information. So it's a wealth of information, and it's really up for any different, it's a publicly accessible source of information and data that the community board can utilize any way that they see that they want to. If you were to go to the Explorer, you can actually look at, this map shows sort of the New York City map, but you can look at specifically CB3, as the boundary, and within that, what the different, what the different data we have for that. Different public agencies, different private agencies, nonprofit agencies, they will all use the tool and explore differently and the data differently. So, it's more of a transparency of data and a way for us to kind of provide that data to the public.
Thank you.
Are there questions from any non-committee members or anybody else attending tonight? All right. Well, thank you so much for,
There's another hand.
Nay. Sorry, I just saw your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just put it up. So I was looking quickly at the Equitable Data Explorer. So it could be used for a lot of, I'm in the Human Services Committee, so I see a lot of stuff there that, we could even use. But I guess it's based on the census, or is it updated? How is it updated?
Yeah, so I forget how many different data sources are there, but there's quite a few, and all of them are listed. So as those data sources are updated, the information in this is updated as well. And I think it is based on the census tract, but then there are different boundaries that you can play with to kind of see what's in, it could be by community district, it could be by the city itself, the borough, the census tracts, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, some of the data we have is only for census tracts, so that's all it could apply to, because the source is only for census tracts. Some are the source is for a lot, so the source is for a larger scale or smaller scale, so it really depends on the source of the data.
Sandra?
Yeah. What is the percentage of board members that need to vote? Because this is not a specific committee vote when we vote on a ULURP. What is the percentage of board members that need to be present? And you understand the question?
Yeah, I think the community board is probably better equipped to handle that. I'm not familiar with the bylaws.
Well, it's not a bylaw issue, it's a charter issue, and 20% must be at the public hearing. The full board votes on the ULURP. And at the committee, any board member can also vote on ULURP at the committee level, then the full board votes, but 20% of the board members must be at the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any last questions? Awesome. Thank you all for being here, or our DCP folks, appreciate it. This was super helpful, and if you could share the presentation, that would be great.
Yes, will do. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I would like to just tell everyone also, this video will be posted on our website, and then I'll put the presentation, I'll put on the website separately also.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the other agenda items, which were the district needs and the budget priorities. So we already spent a committee meeting going through the district need statement line by line. So I sent pretty much the final version to you all. If there's anything that I might have missed that you saw, just let me know, but I'm hoping there are not going to be, or there's not really time for any like substantive changes. But if there's like a word or two that needs to be changed, let me know. Susan, do you want to go into budget priorities?
Sure, and it'll be brief. So as Nisha said, we're voting on both budget priorities and district needs statement this month, but we've already finalized, unless there's like typo or something or a mistake, we've already finalized the district needs statement, and now the committee needs to rank the budget priorities. This is for the budget cycle that starts next fiscal year, which is next July. It is not for the current year. The board can have 25 expense priorities and 40 capital priorities. Expense are smaller items such as salaries or programs. Capital are like developing buildings or major reconstruction. It could be of a building, a park. At the executive committee, priorities from all the committees are collated. Since there are already more than 25 expense priorities, the bottom ranked priorities will fall off. So your ranking is very important. When the priorities are collated, the committee ranking is never changed. We interweave committees, but we never change your rankings. These priorities have all been researched since this summer. And then the 12 Manhattan boards met with approximately 12 agencies for about 12 hours each, 1.5 hours each. And I should mention, this budget priorities is not like participatory budgeting. Participatory budgeting is a city council or the mayor taking a pot of money and saying, how do you want to spend it? What we're doing here is telling the city agencies who spend money in our district what the priorities for the agency programs and spending is in our district. And the goal is to bring more money into our district. So we find out from the agencies what funding is in danger, and which is not. If we think a program is great and it's necessary for a community, but it's well funded, we wouldn't rank it because it doesn't need our advocacy, it's already there. You should have been sent, I believe you were, we copied all of last year's priorities and we annotated them with the city's answers at the time of the adopted budget in January. Since affordable housing is always a CB3 priority, at the meeting with HPD, I asked the commissioner how we could put that into budget priorities. And the way he said to do it is in the list. I suggested it there. I also, when we met with NYCHA, asked if they looked at our rankings and all, and they said they do. They're interested in what the board finds important, but it's clear that they have their own list, and it did not seem that we're going to be influencing it. However, we have 40 capital priorities, so we have room for all of our priorities. It's how you rank them that's going to be important. And I mentioned we've already researched everything. This includes whether funding comes from the city, state, or federal, because we only have influence over city funding. And also to find out if a project is funded, because the work may not have started, but the funding may already be there. And the list is used widely by agencies and other uses. For instance, council members often look at our priorities when they're designating their discretionary funds. I know hospitals, when they do their district needs statement, looks at our district needs and our priorities. And that's all I have, unless there are questions.
So, Dominic.
Dominic.
Hey, so Susan, I don't think you said this, but in the attachment that we got, there's the red.
Those are the answers from last year.
Oh, they're from last year.
Those are the annotations from the city that they gave in the adopted budget in January.
Okay, all right.
They're not very helpful.
No, they're not. And so I guess, and I was sort of wondering, like, so what do we do with that? Because most of them, they're basically saying, go talk to your council member, right? And try to get, and I'm assuming it's where we want them to put that in the next budget and for the mayor to support that in the budget. So I didn't know if it was not worth it for us to put those in here because of that.
I would say it depends. Like I said, on the capital priorities, you have room for all of these capital priorities. Nothing's going to fall off. So something's important, you want to keep it on the list. A lot of times what they're saying, and this is often is it depends if they have money. And that part of that answer is the state of our city right now. These were written in, the answers are written in January or before January, when we're still in the middle of COVID. So they really at that time would have a hard time, you know, predicting what the budget was going to be.
So why don't we share it on the screen and we can go through them very quickly. And I think we just need to figure out what we want to keep. If you could zoom in. And then also if we want to like reorder. Susan, that's right. If we want to reorder any.
Yes, you can. I would like to make a suggestion based on, we also every year have our top 3 most pressing needs that the exec kind of renews every year. And one of the top 3 has always been affordable housing. And we've never had city development of affordable housing on our list before, because I think we didn't know how to do it. And since we now do, I would like to suggest the members consider increasing the city investment in development of affordable housing as #1 for a capital priority.
How does the rest of the committee, are there any comments from the committee about that proposal? Supportive, concerns? Dominic? You're muted.
I'm supportive of that. I was just wondering, and maybe this, maybe it needs to be vague for now, but looking at the district needs statement, I mean, we cited some specific programs like the community land trusts and like in programs like Mitchell Lama. So I didn't know if we need to do more research to actually put programs like that down there, or if it's just vague and like fine to be vague and say we want more city funding for
This is what the commissioner said to, this were his exact words of what we should put.
Okay.
Jake?
I'm definitely supportive of adding affordable housing and think that it could be #1, but I just wanted to confirm, Susan, what you said about NYCHA, because I think first and foremost priority should be looking after current tenants, and the elevator situation at some of the senior living NYCHA developments really terrifies me. Is it your sense that they have their own list, and so anything we put on here is just kind of us expressing
These were
Okay.
actually from their list last year. These were all
I see.
from their list of projects that needed to be done but are not yet funded.
I see.
And so they're on their list. They are going to do them basically in the order that they're going to do them. They're going to look at our list, but they're going to do them in their order. But in line with what you're saying, I think everybody, the committee last year, and I, certainly think it's a good idea. I think it's important that we show how important NYCHA, the NYCHA buildings are, but these are from their list of what needs to be funded.
Sure. I guess really what I'm asking is, if we put affordable housing at our #1, is there a chance that there is some decision maker who's going to see that and some of NYCHA's capital funding is going to get
No.
chilled out? Okay,
No.
cool.
No.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Jay, could you scroll down? So Susan, you're saying this should be a capital funding expense.
Yes, right.
Okay. And just to clear, any hesitation about putting it as #1, or should we put it at the bottom of the list after all of the specific NYCHA asks? Damaris?
I just wanted to say that I don't know why we're making this or distinguishing this as a capital need, because all the elevators are capital funding too.
They're all capital. I don't know.
They're all capital. It's like this
Oh, I
list
see.
is the list of
I see that. Got it. Thank you.
We're voting on 2 different rankings, one for capital and one for.
I got it. I just didn't see it say capital up there.
Sorry.
Dominic?
Yeah, do we need to say, Susan, does this mean that this covers both rental and affordable home ownership, or do we need to specify what we're talking about here?
I don't think we need to. I think we're talking about city investment.
Okay.
Okay, so
Jake, you were at that meeting, right, when I asked him?
Yes, that's right. I'm sorry for all of the hubbub on here. I think I was trying to fix the formatting and I'm just making it worse.
it's totally fine.
Don't worry, just have the numbers correct and everything else is fine.
Okay, so we've moved that to the top. I mean, it's a big ask, so who knows what they'll actually do. And then we've listed a number of capital projects for NYCHA. And then we can go down to expense priorities.
Yeah, that's the order you did them in last year.
So Jake, do you want to just go ahead? Did someone have a question?
It's me again. I mean, I'm just, that first bullet, I just don't really understand the point of it. Like, I think it's so vague. Under capital, investment, I mean, the whole thing is, yeah.
That's what the HPD commissioner said, the wording we should use. That's where we got it from. If we want to put that in our capital needs.
I think the indication, and I wasn't there for the conversation, so I don't know, but I think the implication is just to reaffirm that, like, when you're asking, my impression of that phrase is you're asking for subsidized housing, right? You're asking for the city to put more investment in subsidizing either rental or home ownership or any type of housing.
Right, but right now the city does not provide general operating they only provide capital based on like different council members who may allocate funding, but they don't provide any real subsidy. So, I mean, I
think it's for like when new rental housing or other programs are built, like for Ella or any of the HPD programs. Some of it does come from that subsidy that comes from HPD into projects. I think that's what
there is capital funding.
That's what but it is very vague. You're right, it is.
Also, it might be helpful if you want to later, under member resources, we have all the agency questions and answers, and HPD actually had a whole separate presentation that you might want to look at. That included information such as this.
Steve?
Yeah, I think maybe just to sort of flesh out the first item is just to say more investment in development of affordable housing, including supportive housing, perhaps, or housing for seniors, or there's different types of programs for new construction. HPD has the SARA program, which is for senior rental housing. There's supportive housing for people with, disabilities, whatnot. So I don't know if we want to say, for example, or including all of the above.
You can use that as the explanation, underneath all the others show an explanation. You can put that as explanation.
Dominic?
Yes, to Steve's point, what if we, and maybe this also goes in the explanation, but what if we said something like affordable housing in the areas as specified in Community District 3's district needs statement? Because that's, we cover a
They
lot.
need to stand alone. You need to stand alone. They're not going to read. This is going to go to the agencies. They're not going to go read our district needs statement to go with this.
Well, to Dominic's point, we can, in the explanation, we can take the language that we have in the DNS and say,
Oh, if you want to copy it and put it here.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I was saying just reference it, but that's a good idea to copy and paste it.
okay, so we'll put that explanation in. Everyone will see this at full board.
So I need to have that for Thursday night.
Okay.
So if you could send it to me tomorrow,
Yes. But basically what we will include in the explanation, which I will figure out tonight and draft, is a reference to the needs, the housing needs that we see, the types of housing, affordability, et cetera, senior, supportive, within different income bands, et cetera. So I will figure out a phrase for that. Okay. Any other comments on the capital?
I would just change the wording to development of affordable housing instead of and just an edit of the word.
Okay. And then we have LaGuardia, Baruch, 45 Allen, and LES infill 175 Eldridge. Any comments on changing any of that ranking? Jay, could you zoom in a little? I'm getting old. Yes. Thank you.
Dwayne Reed and buy reading glasses.
I think I might. My God. Okay. Well, hearing no comments on that, I'm going to move forward into the expense priorities. Is it just those three?
It is just those three. And like I say, probably the bottom one from a number of committees will drop off because we already have 25 for the board without these, or more than 25.
Okay. So it's the baseline stabilizing NYC program at HPD, increased funding for staffing for grounds maintenance and building maintenance at NYCHA, increased funding for waste management staff and operations at NYCHA buildings.
So can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I would put the first one last. It's, we're urging them to baseline this program, and they're basically telling us they're not going to. And, I think it's still a good idea to tell them, but I would think the two NYCHA programs are existing programs that do need money.
My understanding has always been that the city council can also baseline funding. And it's
No.
not just the agencies, and that's how we have CCC as well. The community consultant contract is not an HPD contract. It is a city council contract, and it's been in existence as long as I've been at Goals.
This is not, none of this is city council money. These are agencies. We're telling the agencies how to spend their money. With city council money, I've actually never heard of them baselining money, but maybe they have some kind of special thing that only they do that's just different from the agencies, but that's not, they don't ask us how to spend their money. They may reference it, but they don't, there's no process for that. So this is only for the agencies. And what we were asking the agencies to do is to take over and baseline that program. And they're basically at this point saying no. That doesn't mean that they won't get money from city council, but that has nothing to do with these priorities.
That was really, oh, sorry, I'll let Dominic go because he raised his hand.
Dominic, go ahead.
So just to clarify though, don't we need the city council to put it in the budget and then pass it? Like, this isn't about, like, we're trying to get past the council funding being discretionary funding, and the agencies are basically saying we don't, it's an unfunded, kind of an unfunded.
Almost everything is unfunded.
Yeah, so we want, just like I know, like with the libraries, right? Like they're in the budget, it was baselined. So isn't that kind of what we're asking?
So yes,
and
you're right.
Yeah, but I understand also what you're saying, right? Like HPD is saying no. So I guess what I'm wondering is, so is this more of like a matter where we need to actually be asking our council members to do this legwork?
So I don't know if you remember, Dominic, back when you were chair, I made up this timeline for the budget priorities. And I said, voting on this is like making a shopping list, and then you should go shopping. So that's what you're talking about. After we have the list, yes, it would be wonderful if people went shopping with it. And yes, there certainly is a negotiation back and forth between the agencies and the city council, the budget dance.
Right.
But what we're doing at this point, and certainly for agencies like parks, that money, the city council members, when they do their discretionary funds, they go right to our list, even though our list goes to park. We also send it to the council members. But this is about our conversation with the agency, because they're going to make the recommendations and they're going to negotiate with city council, as well as absolutely you should go, you should advocate. You should always advocate.
I mean, I'm sorry, but they're not going to negotiate stabilized funding, because stabilizing, HPI, all of those projects are all city council funded, all of them.
Right.
And they're all allocated to, so HPD, I don't know how they negotiated. So I hear what you're saying. Let me finish, Susan, please. I hear what you're saying. But what I think Dominic is saying makes sense to me, and is what I'm trying to say, was just that all of this funding, none of it is in HPD's budget. None of it. None of the funding that not even this. Yeah, so that's basically it. So I'm just a little confused, but we don't have to spend a lot of time on this.
So if I could just clarify, you're absolutely right that this stabilization is in city council. Last year, the committee voted to ask HPD to make it a program in HPD and baseline it. HPD is saying, no, we're not doing it. That's why I said
HPD cannot do it, because it is not HPD who allocates the money.
they can. They can
Okay,
decide.
all right.
They
All
can
right, let's,
change
okay,
it.
okay.
They can change it. You're right.
All right, it's an initiative. I lobby, go ahead though, please.
So an
Let's move forward.
agency can decide to have a program. Every year, they get rid of some programs, they make new programs. Last year, this committee and, voted to ask them to make it an HPD program. And they said no. I mean, regardless if the situation is the same, they said no, which is why I'm suggesting it not be number one. But so what the process, and I wish there was ability for more people to be at these meetings. The agencies do forecast their programs, and then they go to city council and the mayor, but they do make plans for their programs, and that's what we're discussing with the agencies, is their plans. That's how we can have influence. They can go to city council, and city council can say, we're going to defund that program. And we all know what happens. But this is our conversation with the agency.
So given that context, should this priority continue to be the number one expense priority?
Well, can I ask a question? Should it even be on here? Why, if we could vote as a community board for this, can we then also recommend other programs that are in the same position that we'd want to see, that are just as important to be funded?
We have done that. The issue you're going to be dealing with is that we only get 25, and we're already fighting for so much for existing programs that aren't funded well enough.
So Damaris, do you think potentially this comes off this list?
I don't know. I mean, I just think that, there's a lot of different programs that we, benefit from or that are important to stabilizing, the housing situation. And I don't mean stabilizing NYC. I just mean in
Right.
general in this neighborhood. So I think that's up to the committee to decide if
If
they
you
want to
look
put
at
that
that-
here or add more. But like Susan said, there's only a few that we can add. There's only 25. I don't know how we prioritize one over the other than I guess it was voted. I mean, I'll leave it there. I just need to understand.
It was put on because groups came to the community board and a couple years ago and asked to have it put on, and the committee voted. That's how it got there. If you put it last, it'll probably drop off the list anyway. But we can't put on brand new programs because we haven't researched them.
And we did have that public hearing and people did come, and there wasn't really anything for land use, any like expense or capital projects that people wanted to include.
You mean including this or just in a new hearing?
Well, we have one every year for this, and this year there were
Nobody brought anything else.
yeah, no one brought up anything else.
It's all park stuff, but mostly.
So I'm gonna suggest that we consider moving this to number 3 and moving everything else up because of, the explanation that Susan provided that HPD has not put this in there. And even last year did not put this on their agenda to ask for funding for. And it seems like they don't have an intention to. And it seems like 2 and 3, what is currently listed in 2 or 3 are still important items for us. And I don't know if either of those are partially funded or like they're inadequately funded.
Exactly.
Does
Well,
anybody?
this is a classic case of you're really talking to your elected officials here. Or
Yeah.
the city council and asking them for money. You're not talking to an agency when you're asking them for NYCHA money. Because they don't have any money, They get their money from their electeds or from appropriations.
So I think this is a mandatory process that we go through where we do meet with the agencies and we do discuss the programs. And, and if you, like say, if you look at the member resources, you'll see the NYCHA, the agenda and all the questions and answers. And, I think it might just be really clarifying to put this into context.
Jake, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Susan, I guess, could you clarify, it feels kind of like a distinction without a difference, the difference between where stabilizing NYC is right now and what are now 2 and 3, where it says it is recommended this request be brought to the attention of our elected officials?
So so let's clarify a bunch. Okay, stabilizing NYC right now is city council discretionary money. And they, recommend funding this every, I guess, last couple of years. I don't know when it started. The reason it got on this list is pre-COVID, maybe 2 or 3 years pre-COVID, a number of nonprofits in our board came to the public hearing and asked that be made a priority. And we knew at the time, no, I think the first time we put it on, we actually hadn't researched it, and it kind of shows why you need research. And the answer, we put it on a list and the answer came back and said, this isn't our project, this is city council. And then the decision was made, which was kind of a political decision, to ask to have it baselined. And you can, that's a legitimate thing to do. The other are programs in NYCHA right now that are funded, but they can use more funding, and these are important issues in our community. Does that make sense? Am I being clear?
So is the distinction that for the 2 NYCHA programs, NYCHA wants them and just needs more money for them. And we are saying we support that. And for stabilizing NYC, HPD, it seems like doesn't particularly want it. And so we'd be better off just asking city council to appropriate.
We don't have, well, so we don't
Well,
ask city council in
sorry.
this process.
I would be better off writing Carlina
But-
Rivera and asking her to work towards funding this. Is that right? Like as a guy who lives in these villages.
I think it's really good to advocate. Now, I will tell you that generally we go over these lists with the council members every year. And so by having it on the list, even though it's not what the process is mandated for, by having it on the list, if it is on the list, they'll see it, but they also read our district needs. The other programs are existing programs. It's not that NYCHA wants them. NYCHA has them. They are existing programs. They do have funding. They will be programs. They are, but what we're saying is that they need more money to do a better job.
Sure, I guess.
Who are we asking for that money?
NYCHA, this is who in this process we meet with. We meet with NYCHA. This is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, I'm just confused. We are asking NYCHA to appropriate more of their money.
What we're saying is yes, we want them to say when they do their forecasts and when they do their planning and when they work with city council, we're saying, we want you to make this more important and have more money here.
I see. And then the reason we're supposed to bring it to the attention of our elected officials is so that.
That's something you can do. That's what advocacy, that's beyond this process. But I would suggest that making this list gives you very good grounds for further advocacy, as well as other organizations take this list for advocacy.
All right, I understand what you're getting at. Okay.
To
Thank you.
clarify, the responses in red are the responses from the agencies. So that's just like what they're gonna say.
Right.
Okay, now I 100% understand. Thank
Okay,
you.
like that's just, they're being like, go do other things because we heard you and go find money other places too. Okay, so with all of that, the only question we have left to resolve is the ranking. Do we want this moved? Do we want 1 moved down to 3? Is anybody opposed to that?
No, I suggest you do.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move forward.
Yeah, Anisha, maybe if I could just say, I don't know if it's, maybe I didn't start at the proper spot when I was explaining. This process very specifically is mandated by city charter that we do this every year. We have a very specific software that city planning supplies that we have to put our district needs statement and these budget requests must go into that software, and that goes to city planning. This, I mean, no one's going to throw us in jail if we don't do it, but this is a city mandated process that all 59 boards are doing. And if we don't get it in by October 31st, we will get calls from city planning. So I just wanted to explain that it's not kind of a loosey-goosey thing. It's a very standardized process.
Are there any other comments on any of these budget priorities? Susan, do we have to vote on this or do we
Yes,
just
you
vote?
do. You can do one vote for all the priorities and the district needs together.
Okay. Let's go. Okay, so with no other comments on this, then I'll go ahead and move to a vote and close for the meeting. So Anisha Stephen, yes. Jake Gold,
Yes.
Alistair, Andrea,
Yes.
Herman, Trevor,
Yes.
Damaris,
Yeah.
Sandra,
Yes,
Jackie, Dominic,
Yes.
and Steve.
Yes.
All right, with that, we're done. Happy Tuesday. And I will see you all next month.
Thank you, Anisha.
Thank